You know, radio is not a visual medium. And if you haven't seen my Facebook page, you don't even know how I look right now. But if you are watching this on the YouTube channel, you'll notice I'm wearing a knitted red hat. This was actually given to me by a listener. It's not because it's cold in here, although it is cold in here. But that is not why I'm wearing the hat. I would be here hatless were it not February 26th. I um I have a lot that I want to dump into this first segment. I'll be real with you guys. I had like 5 different opens for this program today. And this is the one that I'm going with because it is specific to this day. And maybe some of you guys already know what's going on. A listener had emailed me a while back and told me that this day was coming up and asked if I wanted her to knit me a red hat. She also knitted me a hand towel that had a word on it that I'm not allowed to say on FCC airwaves. And then the second word on it is ice. Now, I know some of you get offended when people say that word, then the letter ice. But what I would say is don't jump to conclusions. Maybe she means the ice that goes in your drink, you know? Um, no way to know. Um, but the hat was the important part of it. And the reason why, and I'm going to read directly from what she sent me here because I was unfamiliar with this. I'm sure, given what I know about my listener base, I'm willing to bet a bunch of you guys probably knew what this day was in history, but I had never heard of it. So I'm going to give you guys a little blurb on what February 26th is all about. The what she sent me says the Red Hat Resistance, February 26th, honoring and remembering the Norwegian World War II resistance movement by wearing a red hat for democracy, menneskeverd, and unity in the resistance revived. Menneskeverd is a Norwegian word for the value of a human being merely for being human, which that sentiment in and of itself is all I really needed to hear in order to get me on board with what this is all about. It goes on. During World War II, Norwegians began wearing red knit caps as a sign of resistance to Nazis who had occupied us. Thursday, February 26, 1942, such wearage was outlawed as a form of protest. Therefore, we encourage anyone and everyone everywhere to put on a red hat on February 26th, which this year, 2026, happens to fall on a Thursday again, in support of democracy, menneskeverd, and unity. If you have the chance, we encourage you to get your knit cap from a neighbor who knits or a local shop. She did a fantastic job. She's got this one strand coming off of here, which you can't see if you're listening on the radio. I highly recommend you check out my socials or check out the video on YouTube later today. I actually have the headphones on over the hat. It kind of looks ridiculous as I look in the video replay of it, but I absolutely love it, and I appreciate that she took the time to do it. And again, the only reason I'm not saying her name is because she asked to be left anonymous here, but I appreciate that so many of you guys taking this seriously. And to be honest, like this is the kind of stuff that I sometimes scoff at, right? It's a warm fuzzies kind of thing. But I also am all about bringing people together, about unity, about pushing back against this, because unlike the Winnebago County, Winnebago County Board, I should say, I have enough guts to say that a masked federal agency that is beholden to nobody, that's murdering Americans, is no good. It is signs of things from a time past reminiscent of 1942. Don't take my word for it. Director of ICE Todd Lyons made the same comparison, so don't get mad at me. And it kind of ties into something that's pretty disappointing. I had to block somebody today on social media, and if you're new to learning who I am, I really don't like to block people. The only person who's ever been blocked from outside the box is somebody who would text me 15 to 20 times a day, highly antagonistic things, attacking me, my family, and really nothing about the show at one point. And I ended up having to do so in the name of my own mental health. But I really, truly avoid blocking people in anything when I can, assuming you're engaging genuinely, because I like keeping channels open. But this individual, and it goes to show you the games that get played. He tells me, "You're so hateful. Why do you guys spend so much time hating one man?" Meanwhile, that one orange man he's talking about does nothing but spew hatred and bigotry towards so many populations of people. And the second you turn around and call him out on it, they want to play the victim card. And it comes to a point where I'm trying to work on being more polite on social media because if you know me, I tend to pop off from time to time. And eventually, if you say the same repetitive things 1,000 times over, I'm going to call you names. And so my options are block you or call you names. And I've learned, and sorry, this isn't all MAGA, but there's enough of you out there that this is unfortunate. As soon as somebody calls you out on your nonsense, you try to get them fired. So, what other options do I have at this point? So, I'm wearing this hat in unity to show that this isn't about hate. This is about unity. This is about coming together. This is about pushing back against a federal force that's trying to pretend like it's 1942 Germany. And it's not about the hate. And if we are going to talk about the hate, then we're going to talk about the hate from the top down rather than the bottom up. That's all I'm going to say about that, though. And thank you again to the listener who made this. Mike out in Kiwani says, as far as the F word on the hat, it seemed to be just fine when MAGA would display bleep Biden, bleep your feelings stickers and flags. No, exactly. Trust me, Mike, it's not lost on me at all. It's absolutely not lost on me at all. I appreciate the support, nevertheless, but I'm right there with you. So I feel your sentiment, and I feel the hypocrisy, or the fact it was President grab him by the you know what. You know what I mean? The irony is not lost on me that I get called out because of the way that I talk. You know what's funny is I used to say this to people in my life about me personally, because people would always give me crap. I come from a town where how can I say this on the air? FCC, or how should I say this? Like how can I say this? Chop busting is very prevalent where I grew up, and people would give me an extra hard time, and I developed a pretty thick skin as a result of it. But not only did I develop a thick skin, I developed, as our orange dad president often says, I developed a capacity to counterpunch. And I counterpunch very well and 5 times over. My mind works very fast, and I'm a very quick-witted dude. I type, then hit enter, and then 10 minutes later, I think to myself, should I have sent that? And that's typically how my process goes. And so I think a lot of people, specifically of the MAGA variety, think they can come at me from that perspective because they think leftists are the soft snowflake types. And I dispel that theory pretty quickly when people try and do that on social media. But then they turn around and try and get me fired. So now, unfortunately, if you want to be a jerk on my socials, goodbye. You're just getting blocked, and we're going to move forward. I don't like living that life, for the record. I don't want to live that life. A lot of you pushed me into that life, and it's unfortunate. But here we are. So with that, I want to get into the first story of the day. And I'm going to be doing the show, at least for most of it, with this red hat on, although it is definitely a little weird on my head while I'm doing the show. But I'd like to remain in solidarity. And KG says, I operate. Yeah. Yeah, I operate on tit for tat. If you bully people, I give you the disrespect that you have earned. That's kind of how I look at it too, KG. Respect is earned, not given. And you got an orange jerk going in front of a microphone, posting pictures of black people as monkeys, calling Somalis pirates, saying hateful stuff about the transgender community. And you're like, this guy kind of sucks, and he's enacting policies similar to the Gestapo. And all MAGA's like, why would you say that? And it's like, because I have a basic capacity for deductive reasoning, mostly. But that clearly offends some of you. But so, with that, let's get into the news of the day here, shall we? The Marquette poll data came out, and I think it is worth wait, what's this say here? About 25 years ago, this is from Larry in North Carolina. I became really good at troubleshooting machinery at that point, and I thought, well, let's try doing the human machine. Wow, what a mistake. I find that certain personalities in general go from bully to pity me in a heartbeat. No, I feel that. I feel that for sure. And again, it's not everybody. There's plenty of people that can engage, and we have fun, and we rib each other back and forth, and then we move on. But it's just when some people get so antagonistic and so over the top, eventually you got to take your own mental health into account when you're making these kind of decisions. So unfortunately, I had to block somebody today. Somebody who is one of the original listeners of this show, which kind of sucks. But it's either that or deal with nonsense every single day and carry it with me all the time, which I'm still a human being. So that's basically what this boils down to. Now, enough of that. Marquette polling time. As I stated during the tease, we are far away from any kind of elections. We have April elections for Supreme Court, for governor, for gubernatorial candidates. The primaries aren't until August. So we're going to be hearing from these people for quite a while. And a couple of them have reached out to me. We will be interviewing them, I promise you, on this show. And there's a lot of reasons why I want to interview them. And we'll be getting into some of those in a moment. I know Kelda Royce has a new healthcare program for the state of Wisconsin that she believes will save rates. I have the rundown of how it would work that I find pretty interesting that I'd like to go over with her in the near future. I know Francesca Hong was featured on a Time article, one of 9 candidates in 2026 who is vehemently opposed to the construction of data centers around the nation, and seen as that is such a winnable election point, and there are so many candidates, both Democrat and Republican, that seem hell-bent on taking PAC money from AI companies and furthering the construction of these data centers that between 2/3 and 3/4 of us don't want. The fact that one of the candidates for Wisconsin was featured on a national publication of people, by the way, that Time article had Republicans, liberals, progressives, independents. When I say Republicans, I mean both MAGA and traditional Republican. Across the spectrum, if you are anti data centers and unchecked, unregulated AI, you were included in that set. And Francesca Hong was one of them, which I think is worth highlighting here. The interesting part about it is on the Democratic side. We'll start there, and then I'm going to go to the conservative side. Representative Hong actually is leading the pack. Now, she's leading the pack with 11%, which is not a particularly high percent. However, former lieutenant governor and former Senate candidate Mandela Barnes is in second place at 10%, and Sarah Rodriguez, who is the current lieutenant governor, is polling in at third at 6%. Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley is at 3%, and everybody else is at 2% or under. Now, if you quickly run those numbers, or if numbers aren't your thing and you ran out of if you ran out of the mental bandwidth to keep track, that still leaves 65% at undecided. So there's plenty of room to kind of decide here what way they're going to ultimately end up finding themselves voting. But it does stand out to me here that one candidate who really doesn't have the same kind of name recognition or isn't operating in cities the size of Milwaukee necessarily is currently polling in first place. And moreover, and I've been kind of highlighting this for a while, and I'm going to have a couple of different polls that kind of feature this in a more intentional way. I have been saying for a while, specifically within the Democratic Party, there's a desire, there's an appetite for progressive politics, not liberal identity politics, not MAGA what identity politics, but progressive, economy first, fix the broken systems politics. It resonates with people. I've been saying it for a long time. And when Mamdani won, there were a handful of people willing to say, we do not have Wisconsin ain't New York. There isn't a desire for a Mamdani-style candidate in New York, to which I responded by having an entire hour-long conversation with you guys. Some of you, I'm sure, remember it, where I asked if a candidate came to Wisconsin, to Northeast Wisconsin specifically, to the Outagamie County area, to the Brown County area, would you vote for somebody who was running on a freeze the rent policy? And I shared my own experiences with my rent and how it's gone up 3 times in 3 years, and how I am paying more to live in a single bedroom unit with a corporate landlord in Menasha than I am charging people to live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city of Pittsburgh. And then I ended up getting inundated with calls. Again, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and Progressive, all sharing their stories. People living in trailer parks whose rent went from $650 to $1,050 a month in less than 3 years. People that experienced nothing but rent growth over Democratic leadership, Republican leadership, and everywhere in between. And I said, I think there's more of an appetite for this stuff than a lot of people are letting on. And the fact that a candidate who is viewed as the most left-wing candidate in the pack, is currently polling only 1 point ahead. The wheels could come off, but is currently polling 1 point ahead of the more centrist style candidates who have name recognition, who are running on status quo politics. Well, that ain't nothing. That's definitely something to be to consider. And you watch, and I can tell, and I'll be able to express why. I can back some of these what I'm about to say up, but you can tell the Republican Party is a bit nervous about the fact that Hong is polling in first. Now, she's dressed down in certain instances, right? Like she shows up and she's not dressed in a suit, and of course Republicans are going to say we're the party of decorum. Now watch as the president post a picture of black people as monkeys, and they're going to say she cusses too much. Now grab them by the you know what. And, a bunch of hypocritical stuff that I don't take into consideration, even kind of. But most importantly, they're highlighting that 65% of people have no idea what they're going to do in the Democratic Party, and that says more about their ineffectual leadership and the fact that no one knows what they're doing in the party, which to a certain extent, within the centrist flank, I would argue is absolutely accurate. For the record, the Democratic Party, the establishment, is still less popular, according to this same poll, than MAGA right now. Not because MAGA's popular. MAGA's well into the negatives. But the Democratic Party, both obviously coming from the right, but more importantly, coming from the left, people are not happy with what the Democratic Party is. The status quo ain't going to cut it, even in a purple state like Wisconsin. That's what this data tells me. And I'm open to other interpretations, 920-281-1150. But here's where cold water gets poured on that whole Democratic leadership has it so 2/3 of people find themselves as undecided in this current with this current batch of candidates. Tom Tiffany is running relatively unopposed. There's another individual, Mansk, in the running as well. I'm going to be honest. I do this for a living, and this is the first time I've heard of him. I remember Josh Schoeman, who had been running well before Tom Tiffany, who ended up dropping out and saying that cohesion within the Republican Party is more important than not. So we have the essentially unopposed Tom Tiffany, Mansk, and then undecided. And those percentages go as follows: 35% for Tiffany, 2% for Mansk, 63% undecided. The Republican candidate is essentially running unopposed, and almost 2/3 of people that are Republican voters, almost 2/3 of them find themselves in a position where they don't know if they would vote for this guy or not, and there aren't even other options. Now, don't get me wrong. I always encourage my listeners to vote. And if there's someone listening to me right now that identifies as Republican that thinks they could put a run together, you could very easily. There's almost 2/3 of the vote that is up for grabs right now that is looking for somebody that makes sense when they talk. That goes for the Democratic Party as well. And again, there's 8 choices. So a lot of that undecided nature is coming from, well, I need to learn more about all of these candidates before I feel comfortable making an informed decision. The Republican candidate is just people saying, yeah, I don't know about this guy, and there isn't another option, so what? Where are we going with this from here? And I think that should probably be taken a little more seriously than I think it is. And the real kicker to all this, and I'm going to double back into the Marquette polling in just a second, but I want to go to University of New Hampshire polling for a second, just to kind of stick this point a little bit harder. Susan Collins has been viewed as a more centrist Republican for a while. Now, when it comes to economic policy, she will absolutely vote to give all of your tax dollars to billionaires and cut social programs, regardless of the obvious benefits that come with funding social programs. But in the current race for the senator of Maine right now, if you look at Plattner and Collins running head to head, it's 49-38 Plattner. Whereas if Janet Mills is the candidate, it's 41-40 Mills. Still, the Democrat is in the lead, but it's within the margin of error. Plattner is currently leading Janet Mills, the blue MAGA liberal, by almost 30 points in this polling data at this point. There's a desire for this leftward shift. It's becoming unavoidable. Whether it's in a centrist state like a purple state like Maine, a purple state like Wisconsin, a deep blue state like New York, or even in places like Texas, We're representatives, we're people like James Tellerico, who I still don't know if I trust, to be perfectly frank. He might be a sheep in wolf's clothing, or the other way around, a wolf in sheep's clothing. There we go. I don't know about him yet. I need to get a feel for him a little bit more, but I know he says a lot of the right things. I know he understands the rhetoric quite well. And that it's resonating very much in Texas. Will he win or not? I don't know. I don't believe in the fool's gold that a lot of Democrats do, that Texas is winnable right now. Technically, all states should be winnable, but it's going to be a lengthy process, and I think Democrats have to show on a macro scale that they can actually get something accomplished that's beneficial before they start looking at the more smaller scale victories like that. Not to say anything towards local governance. I mean state versus national. But that's just my humble opinion, of course. But regardless of how you look at it, independents have Plattner 47-38. People 18 to 34 have Plattner 63-25 over Collins. Women have Plattner 54-30 over Collins. Again, Mills is also winning, but those percentages are much closer because less people are interested in Blue MAGA in 2026. This is not my opinion, although it has been my opinion since 2022 when you guys met me. But it is borne out in reality time and time again. I mentioned it yesterday. We went over it on Friday. A 13-person focus group in the failing New York Times. All Democrats, 13 out of 13, all said, we're done with liberal. Give us a progressive who actually intends to do something outside of the status quo. Donald Trump is the Democratic Party's worst nightmare. Not in the way they think he is, though. What I'm watching as somebody who is a progressive, who wants to see the government take the healthcare industry by the you-know-whats, take them and say, you're going to work for us now. We've given you billions of dollars of subsidies, and you're going to come through for the American population. It turns out that Donald Trump can make a masked Virgin Army and have them murder people in the streets, and nobody gets arrested, and they just keep operating with impunity. It turns out that the Supreme Court can tell Donald Trump that tariffs are illegal, and he just finds 15 workarounds to continue doing the tariffs. I obviously am anti-ICE. I'm kind of on the fence about tariffs. I'm very pro not allowing the pharmaceutical industry to buy third and fourth yachts at the expense of Americans dying because they can't afford health care in the richest country on the planet. And it is becoming abundantly clear to me that if a Democrat meant business, even when the checks and balances try and stop him or her from taking pharmaceutical industries, elder care facilities, big ag, whatever the situation may be, taking these people to task, it turns out that you can actually pull a lot of levers, and Congress can whine and moan, and the Supreme Court can whine and moan, and the American public can whine and moan, and you can just keep doing these things, and even if they're not popular, which they would be popular, just pretend that they're popular, and about 28% of the country will go along for the ride anyway. The Democrats should be nervous as hell that we are sitting here watching a president act like a child, throwing tantrums, doing whatever he wants, polling at 30% with so many of his different campaign issues, and he continues doing them anyway. And then Democrats have 60% of the people supporting federally legalized marijuana, taking Medicare for all and actually applying it to the people, addressing the housing crisis and building homes to bring the price down so that 30-year-olds are able to get into the housing market, like was so doable for boomers when they were able to do so. There is an appetite for it. There is a desire for it. And the Marquette poll is showing that. And the UNH poll is showing that. And the Quinnipiac poll is showing that. And focus groups are showing that. And the failing New York Times is showing that. And the Wall Street Journal is showing that. And the only people that don't want to take this on are the blue MAGA centrists that literally stood up during the State of the Union only one time, and it was to cheer on the war in Iran that the Republican Party is also pushing based on fake WMD claims. We have the people behind us. This show is more representative of the masses than I have ever felt it has been before today, and I personally am excited by the data that's coming out and looking forward to what's next. Of course, I also don't trust the Democratic Party to not pour cold water on all that and really force Gavin Newsom to the top of the ticket. Notice he's getting a lot of national coverage lately. Don't fall for it. Dude sucks. Betsy says all the Republican folks driving around with Let's Go Brandon bumper stickers will probably not enjoy the Let's Go Ice version. An idea for your listener made towel. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. It's almost like Let's Go Bryce or something like that, because I can't say ice. Otherwise, it'll just look like I'm in favor of it. But that's actually, I'm going to work on that. What's this say here? Subject misdirected mail. A postcard supporting mail-in voting for Judge Chris Taylor was sent to me in Appleton via Honolulu, Hawaii. It has a cancellation stamp of February 9th. I got the postcard about 11 days later. Wait, I'm confused by what you're saying, though, because the election isn't for another 2 months. So what are you saying happened there? And KG says the anti-Plattner chatter I hear is fears that he'll become another Fetterman. It's always on the table, KG. I mean, you got to be aware of this kind of stuff. That's why I don't trust Tellerico either. But the one difference I notice between Fetterman and Plattner is Plattner is willing to say our tax dollars shouldn't be going to genocide. It should be going to health care. And that's something that Fetterman can't bring himself to say. Now, will he vote like that? I'm not a fortune teller. But saying the right things is half the battle. When the Republican Party is running on, wouldn't it be better if Jeff Bezos had all the money? And then Democrats are running on, wouldn't it be better if Ukraine and Israel had all the money? The best we can hope for right now is a candidate that says, hey, wouldn't it be better if we actually invested the money in the American public and making life better here in the States, and then working from there. And I like what I hear, but I also am open to the fact that it could be a ruse. Everybody could be a ruse. Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were ruses, right? They made sure we didn't get the decreased prices of drugs for people under the age of 65. They're the reason why we had to roll back the child care tax or the child tax credit that pulled half of kids out of hunger. They're the reason why we didn't get a $15 minimum wage. And then Joe Biden can say, well, it's those two darn liberals with all the conservatives. And then here we are 6 years later without any of that stuff happening still, and a mass Gestapo running around murdering Americans. I totally get it. With that, Hal says before we go, while you were in Thailand, a progressive won the Democratic Senate race in New Jersey, although I believe it may have been an anomaly because AIPAC involved in their races. Well, that's a lot more prevalent than it used to be in general, and it's much more of an albatross than it used to be as well. That's what's going to be interesting for Democrats is the big tech money and AIPAC money that kept them afloat for as long as it did is now going to be viewed from leftists as a reason not to vote for them anymore because they hate data centers and they hate genocide. So it's going to be an interesting development here in 2026, but I've been saying it for the last couple of days. If Democrats think they're going to be able to get away with a return to status quo and civility in the White House, they have a rude awakening coming to them. And I was the bellwether in 2023. I was the bellwether in 2024, and I am the bellwether in 2026. There will be a rude awakening. And what's interesting about that New Jersey race, Hal, is that was to fill in for the woman, Cheryl, who ended up becoming the governor of New Jersey, who is very much a centrist, who is a blue MAGA liberal, and a far left progressive took her seat after she was a centrist, showing that even where that candidate came from was looking for more pushback to a status quo that was unacceptable. Sign me up for a good time. I'm very excited about this. Now, I received a text message from Ethan about the Marquette polling, but not specific to politics, specific to something I was talking about during the local hour, localized gambling in our state. And I'd like to read his response, but I've been talking for almost 30 minutes. So I'm going to go to break, and then I will read that text message. I will take any other comments from people as well. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. If you're watching on Political Voices Network, because I know some of you guys send me messages on the YouTube channel. My emails are starting to get a little more active, which is awesome. But if you want to take part in the show, we're on 9 to 11 Central Time, Monday through Friday. Regardless of when you're seeing me on YouTube, that's when you can take part in the show live. So if you're ever messaging outside of those hours, I'm not going to see it, but we'd love to hear from you guys as well. So with that, we'll be back. Stay right where you are. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. All right, we've returned. All right. So If you guys weren't listening during the local half hour, Marquette Polling doesn't just cover politics, it covers a number of issues as well. One of them is legalized sports gambling. Now, to the newer audience, I have gambled. I am a gambler. It's technically not legal in Wisconsin, but there are apps that are absolutely gambling apps that are legal right now in Wisconsin. I'm not breaking any rules for doing it. I'm not going to act as an advertisement for those apps, so I'm not going to say the names of them. But if you have a social media account and you follow sports at all, something tells me you have seen the ads in Wisconsin for one of the gambling apps that is legal. The only thing they don't let you do is like they won't let you change the spread, but they'll literally let you bet on the spread of a game. They'll let you bet on the over under. They let you bet on the higher or lower for different prop bets. And it's all legal as it stands right now, and it's on your phone. In terms of the actual sports book betting, you have to go to a Native American reservation. Now, there's an ad playing on our station by the Sports Betting Alliance that A refers to Native Americans as Indian, which someone need to tell them that Christopher Columbus did not find India. He was kind of stupid, and he found America. So they're not Indians because they're not from India. They are native to the country of America, and they're referred to as Native Americans. So he's a former AG, and I'm surprised he was able to win that election because he seems kind of stupid. But make sure you kind of talk about these people in the right light. But nevertheless, you are able to vote legally on Native American reservations. And there's a bit of an element to that as well that I could get into, but I'm not going to right now. But I find that to be very shady as well, because just like with any other population of people, there's a handful of people getting rich off of it, while so many people are not. And then those handful of people benefiting from it are then used to represent the entire population of a people in the name of vilifying them and getting people to jump on board. Now, why is it that a former Republican AG feels comfortable trying to other a minority in this state in order to get the conservative voters in this state to jump on board with legalizing gambling? Far be it for me to jump to conclusions. I'd hate to name call. But it does seem as though they're banking on the what identity politics to kick in that conversation. Prove me I'm wrong. That spot will play during the next commercial break. You guys let me know what you think. 64% oppose legalizing gambling, online sports betting in Wisconsin, while 34% are in favor. Opposition right now is bipartisan. 61% of Republicans, 66% of Democrats, and 74% of independents all want to see the apps remain illegal in the state of Wisconsin. Now, I have used this as an example before, but I don't think I've talked about it with the new audience yet. I would argue that legalizing gambling is probably what I have changed my mind on the most since doing this for a career. I very much was thrilled when casinos started opening in Pittsburgh, my hometown, when DraftKings and FanDuel were made legal in Pennsylvania. I was very excited. But I also, given my predisposition in life, have control over how I spend my money that I think a lot of people don't necessarily possess. And far be it for me to tell other grown people how to spend their money. I do identify as a social libertarian. I'm a financial progressive and a social libertarian. However you want to spend your money, whoever you love, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to put in your body, I am okay with it. Don't hurt anybody else, and we'll do what we do to facilitate you being able to live the kind of lifestyle that you want to live. I am absolutely on board with that element of society. And if gambling did become legal nationwide, I would probably be a pretty big advocate for making sure that there were the appropriate places that help you in position, because the one difference between being addicted to gambling and being addicted to anything else, and I don't want to come across as crass here, but most other addictions will kill you. When you're addicted to cigarettes, eventually you get cancer. When you're addicted to heroin, eventually it just kind of takes your life. When you're addicted to most drugs, eventually it just kills you, and the heartbreak is over. I don't want to sound like I'm not trying to be cold-hearted about it. This is just cold hard facts. If you don't have the support systems in life, that is the inevitable outcome of what most drug and plant-based addictions ultimately lead themselves to. I think it's very important me to highlight one drug that doesn't do that is marijuana, and maybe that should be more legalized than other things. But waka waka, Republicans control the assembly and legislature, or and Senate still. So here we are. The difference between that and gambling is all gambling can do is keep you in a perpetual state of being broke and on this debt treadmill that so many of us find ourselves on in America, even without a gambling addiction, let alone with one. So what you're doing is creating a population of people that are so desperate to find their ways out of student debt that maybe find themselves diagnosed with an illness that has their medical bills costing them $5,000 or $6,000 a year, and they see a quick fix. Oh, I know football. I know football really well. The Packers, there's no way they're going to lose to the Browns this week. Joe Flacco's the quarterback. They're going to crush them. I'm going to throw a second mortgage payment. Whoops, the Browns won. And all of a sudden now you have 3 times the debt because you didn't make an educated decision. And it's preying to me on a very desperate population of people. I mean, hell, when CNN partners with Kalshi, which is a betting odds for political decisions, when the freaking Trump family is creating their own betting system for political decisions, I'm sure that won't be bastardized. We are absolutely setting ourselves up for failure with these conversations. And I don't like the trajectory we're on. And I'm not a wet blanket. Dang it. You guys know me. I'm very much a fun person. I enjoy fun activities. I enjoy being fun. And for the record, I still use some of those legal gambling apps. I never bet more than $20 on anything over the course of a week. And I never am chasing. And as one person very close to me in life always said, you never bet because you have to win. That's the best advice I can give you for a habit that you should probably just try to avoid. Now, I received a message from Ethan during the news break from the 8:30 to the 9 hour, and I want to read what he had said to me here. I strongly oppose legalization, and I welcome any other thoughts on it as well. 920-281-1150. I strongly oppose legalization of online sports betting in the state. I even written my local representative about it. The convenience of online is a trap. They kick people off their apps that are successful and select their customers to be the worst bettors and addicts. There's a reason they have so much money to advertise and buy off our politicians. We need to keep this cancer out of our state. And this is coming from someone who likes gambling. It's just the way we are going about it in this current ecosystem is just going to be plundering from people who can't control themselves. And I was deeply disappointed when our own state senator in Appleton was an author of the bill, which that being Chris Alfheim, which I'm going to reach out to her to see if she'll come on the show to discuss this, because what you'll hear, and you'll even hear it in the spot that's going to play, it's going to be about generating revenues, which if that's the case, then I'm sure Republicans will be lining up to legalize marijuana in the name of generating those revenues. Unless, of course, one of these is very addictive and one of these is just a supplement for booze. That couldn't be the case, could it? But Ethan's exactly right. I'm not proud to say this out loud, but when the gambling apps were first legal and me and the friends of mine that were sports people kind of went a little overboard, I'd be sitting there, I'd place a bet on a game, and by 5 minutes left in the second quarter, I knew that my bet was not going to hit. And you can sit there and place a bet for the second half of the game right there on your phone. And the craziest part is go try and cancel your Netflix subscription, and you almost will never be able to find the process to do it. You want to add money to your gambling app? It's 2 clicks, and there's a lot of bright, beautiful buttons that send you directly towards those put more of your life savings into my app, please buttons. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience. Never had a problem, but absolutely know people that did, and more importantly, do. Larry says odds are better on the stock market, but it's still gambling. I've been saying that for years, except for the stock market is gambling on where are Elon and Jeff going to put all their money, and did you guess the right companies? Kristen says, I know I'm oversimplifying it, and you've done well investing and doing stocks and whatnot. But you know me, I'm a skeptic with this kind of stuff. Kristen saying, I have seen gambling destroy lives, break up families, and while people don't OD and die, the financial despair can lead to suicide. The suicide rate is high in Las Vegas hotel rooms for a reason. And I told this story a couple of days ago during the local half hour of my show, and it's not funny. at all. But I remember, like, we will rib our friend about it. I have a friend from college. There were European sites where you could play poker on the internet against real people. And he lost $500 in about 10 minutes. And you heard the scream from so far down the hallway. And we all went to see what was wrong. And later that night, because we were children, right? We're 18 years old. We don't know what goes into money. You lose $500 to an 18-year-old. $500 is $100,000. You know what I mean? Like I was buying cases of beer with 4 other friends, and we'd each chip in $3. Like that's what we were doing in college when we were freshmen. Of course, not me, because that's illegal. But I say all that to say this person was ready to take his own life because he didn't want to tell his parents he lost $500, and he literally thought that he was never going to recuperate financially from the decision that he made. And we're debating whether or not we're going to put entire populations through that process. And I'm just not going to do it. Anna simply says, note to self, Ben is not fun at parties. I'm pretty sure you're banned from the text line from earlier this week. Ben says, more gambling, marijuana, prescription drugs, and it will distract us from what our government and taxes are doing. You're not wrong there. It's bread and circuses, and Ben is speaking from experience, having overcome addiction himself. So oftentimes straight from the horse's mouth is the best way to take these sort of things, and I think that he has a fair point to make right there. I have a lot more to say about this, but we are pressing up against it, so I have to get to break. But we can jump back into this on the other side. I also have some other stories I wanted to jump into here as well. But if anyone has any other comments, 920-281-1150, do me a favor, stick around through this commercial break. If you're listening live, you'll hear what I'm saying. And I'll get back to this soon. So everyone stay where you are. Outside the Box, WHBY. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box on WHBY and the Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Couple of you guys have been sending, I just got a text from Rich sending me a picture of himself in his red hat. I'm in my red hat today for anybody who missed the first hour of the show. If you're watching on YouTube, then you're like, why is this guy telling me he's wearing a red hat? I can clearly see you, bro. Because I'm doing a radio show, guys. Keep up. And you guys are listening like 3 hours in the future from when I'm doing this. So I'm letting everybody else know what's going on here in the audience. And I do love, for those of you that are listening terrestrially, you got a chance to hear that Gambling Alliance spot that's playing on here, specifically encouraging Republicans to jump on board with legalized gambling. And again, if it did get legalized, it's not like in the world of Ben, as with most of the conversations we have on this show, I'm going to remain relatively unfazed. I already went through my like, oh my God, I can't believe this is legal phase of my life. And I've kind of moved on now to like, okay, this is dumb and clearly a money sink, and I'm pretty sure it's rigged. And I don't like my chances. And as one texter, I believe it was Ethan, highlighted, like if you do too well on those apps, they kick you off of there. There's actually a very famous case from last year during the MLB playoffs. I want to say it was in Boston, but don't quote me on that. The app messed up. And for those of you that aren't gambling savvy, I'm going to try and describe this as simply and in such a straightforward process as I can. But essentially the way a parlay works is you bet on like 3 different things to happen. It could be 8 different things. And all of them have to happen. If one of them doesn't happen, you lose. But if all 3 of them happen, like the odds shoot through the roof. Like, honestly, that's when I do bet $10. That's what I do. I bet like a 6-leg parlay. The odds of it happening are like a billion to 1. And then if it does happen, you win like 300 something bucks. You're like, oh, I can't believe that happened. And if you lose $10. And to me, if you are going to gamble, that is the safe way to do it. You're probably not going to win. When you do win, it's super exciting. And then when you lose, it was $10 to be a little extra excited for the Packers or Steelers that day, right? This individual, the app had broken in a way that allowed him to essentially take one batter, who was Ohtani, who is the player in baseball right now, and he basically parlayed him. And this shouldn't work, but he bet him to get more than 2 hits and more than 3 hits and more than 4 hits and more than 5 hits. And he parlayed all those together. Then Ohtani shows up and gets 6 hits. And this guy bet a crap ton of money on it and ended up winning hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the app sued him because they said, yeah, this was our mistake. We messed up, but this isn't supposed to work this way. And we shouldn't have to pay this out. And I'm happy to report that this story does have a happy ending, and the giant mega billion-dollar corporation did have to pay the guy for the mistake that the giant billion-dollar corporation made, which is oftentimes what we hold an individual American to. So it's nice to see that occasionally the wealthy are held to the same standard, but they fought tooth and nail to not have to pay it out. I actually, in PA, casinos are legal everywhere, and we have a blackjack table. A friend of mine bet a $2.50 bet on a prop bet and won $2,500. And it always stuck out to me because you could tell the pit boss was scowling at us the entire time after it happened. And the second he won, he had to fill out tax forms to make sure that he lost half of it to the government right away. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk get tax loopholes to circumvent paying taxes, but God forbid a poor accidentally acquire a bunch of money. We will tax the crap out of that individual the moment they come across that money and make sure they pay every cent, and will ruin their lives if they don't. And then hopefully that person will grow up to resent taxes and vote to cut billionaire taxes even further. Fun fact with that individual, that actually did work. But I mean, interesting perspective nevertheless. I am against it, although I can see this happening. And what sucks is, much like with the farm bill, if you guys remember from a couple years ago, that wouldn't allow giant farms to host weddings anymore because the people that own wedding venues that gouge us for wedding venues were mad that farms were charging cheaper prices. Nobody wanted to see it happen. And of course, that's when Democrats and Republicans can find a way to work together. It's when everybody wants to see something happen that bipartisanship really isn't an option at this point. And what's funny is Kathleen says, how the heck is Evers going to be in cahoots with those? And she uses the Indians' words, obviously, ironically, if he's not even running for governor. That damned Evers. And I dig it. I dig it, Kathleen. Exactly. There was a lot of buzzwords in that. I wish I wrote his name down this time, but I didn't. Don't care to know who he is. And something tells me I'll be hearing his name a lot over the coming days as they try and force this through here. Again, it's very un-Ben-like to be against this, but my spider senses are going off, and I just don't like the trajectory we're on. We already have a system designed to not pay you enough and keep charging you more and more for the same stuff we've always had. And now they're gonna dangle this golden carrot in front of your face and tell you, oh no, this is how you get out of that medical debt that literally no other industrialized country has to deal with, and they live longer than us and pay 2 to 5 times less per capita. But no, you need to really know who. Right when the playoffs start, you place that $10 bet on who's going to be the Super Bowl MVP. Pick a dark horse. Bada bing, bada boom. Those chemo treatments all of a sudden pay for themselves. God bless America. That got dark at the end there, didn't it? Corby says, I thought all state tribes have to join or sign off on the bill. To me, Corby, I'm not 100% certain on the specifics, and I'd like to talk to somebody about this. So rather than shoot from the hip on this, because I know they are holding it up, I am talking more so about a PSA that's playing right now, and the way that certain politicians that I'm assuming are on the take from sports gambling lobbies are portraying those tribes as the enemy of the people. They're essentially they're coming to trans your kids, Native American tribes right now, and get enough of the whites angry at Native Americans so that they will vote for this bill or support this bill. And that's the way I'm interpreting it, at least as of right now. And this is coming from somebody who's seen it legalized. This is coming from somebody that knows that there is definitely a fun element to this. And I was a casino goer, but I was a casino goer maybe 4 times a year. And as that stuff becomes more prevalent, and that was at a time when, I was able to rent an apartment in one of the most fun places in Pittsburgh with 3 other roommates for $300 a piece. Now it would cost us like $1,100 a piece to live in the same place with 4 people. That was coming from a time when life was a little bit more affordable as well, and you weren't looking for some kind of alternative because I know, crazy concept, but jobs, while they still didn't pay enough, paid barely enough for like a young person to kind of struggle, and it's romantic to be in your early and mid 20s and be a struggling person trying to find it in this society. It's when you hit your 30s and 40s and you're working a very professional job, struggling to find a capacity to do that, that, people with more than 3 IQ points to rub together might be able to acknowledge that possibly some of these systems are broken. But who am I to say? All right. And with that, though, I am going to pivot, unless, of course, anybody else has any thoughts on the matter. 920-281-1150. I do want to touch on this a little bit here. Is our mailing system right now. Mail-in voting is not corrupted. And the person who sent me the hat said, I can't wait to listen to your program in its entirety, rocking the red hat and something nice. And she's got her hat on as well. Watch the YouTube channel as well. You'll see me in it. And I have the headphones on over the hat. I look ridiculous, but I'm doing it in solidarity. I look ridiculous all the time. Who am I kidding? I don't know if you guys knew this yet, but Joe Biden won in 2020. Like, unequivocally, there's no voter fraud. And there's one guy really struggling with that concept, and he's telling a lot of people, I'm not going to call them stupid. I'm going to call them really, really gullible. He's telling a lot of really, really gullible people that he didn't lose the election, and like a handful of them still believe it. And as a result, they want to pass legislation that makes it way more difficult for red-blooded Americans, and specifically women, to be able to vote. I don't know if you guys knew this, but women tend to trend towards a particular political party. And it's all in the name of election security, that before this particular orange moron showed up, nobody was questioning election security. And for the new listeners, because I really would like to highlight this, because not enough people say this. Donald Trump was anticipating losing to Hillary Clinton in 2016. There's a lot of people that will tell you that he was caught off guard by his victory just as much as a lot of people in the liberal establishment were as well. I am of the belief, and I think it's borne out in reality, and I'll be able to back that up in a second, even though we're going to have to dabble in the hypothetical here for a moment, that if Donald Trump had lost in 2016, he was going to question the validity of the election for 4 years. And he was going to tell you that 3 million illegals voted in order to get Hillary Clinton the office. And the reason I know that he was going to do that is because the man bleeping won in 2016, and he said it anyway, because his ego's this big, and he was ticked off that he lost the popular vote by roughly 3 million votes. So instead of just winning and moving on and not giving the game away, he decided to use the excuse that he was going to use for losing the election in general, and used it to explain why he couldn't win the popular vote. Which, fine, he gets to say stuff, liberals just ignore it, conservatives, I'm sure, believe it, but it felt harmless. Fast forward to 2020, and then he loses by 8 million votes, badly, to an obviously sundowning Joe Biden, because the dude's a bad president. People are remembering that real quickly here, aren't they? And he turns around and uses the same excuse again. Oh, these illegals voting against me. Here's my proof. Oh, wait, I have no proof, but don't worry. These gullible MAGAs will parrot it anyway because I said it, and they very rarely question anything I say, and get offended when people highlight that they don't question anything I say. Dinesh D'Souza, who was one of the most outspoken the election was rigged people, he's the one that created that 2,000 Mules documentary that proved that Joe Biden and the liberals stole the election. And when questioned under oath, he's like, yeah, I have absolutely no evidence that any of that happened. I'm just tricking rubes into believing the stuff that I say. And even though that's on the record, people will still cite that as some kind of empirical source that the election was rigged. The election was not rigged. And yet now we're talking about the SAVE Act, despite the fact that none of you listening have any evidence to to back up these claims. You now want to see a SAVE Act passed that is going to make it more difficult specifically for women to vote and for just about everybody. Because again, and I've told this story a couple times now, I did not have a passport or a birth certificate until about 3 months ago. And it was about a 3-month process for me to get it done. And spoiler warning, I'm American. And more importantly, and I'm going to get back to mail in a second, but I only found this out yesterday, and I think it's really important for me to highlight this. There is the SAVE Act, and then there is also the Save America Act. Both of those are legislation geared at making it more difficult to vote. But more importantly, and anybody who knows me knows that I am an advocate for this, the Save America Act would ban nationwide ranked choice voting from ever being an option, because both Republicans and blue MAGAs know that third parties would reign supreme if ranked choice voting ever took off, because it would give people the comfort of voting for a candidate that otherwise would be viewed as quote unquote throwing your vote away. Be able to vote for them and still mark your establishment candidate, whether that be Trump, Biden, Hillary, whomever. And yes, Trump is establishment. Hate to break it to you, MAGA. You could rank them second and still feel comfortable voting for somebody else as your first pick. This would make voting third party and fourth party and fifth party much more appetizing than doing it any other way. And that's included in the Save America Act, but they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about catching them Mexicans from voting. Meanwhile, they have no evidence that them Mexicans were voting because it's an objective lie. It's an objective lie that gullible rubes believe. And also included in this bill, or not in this bill, but what was ruled by the Supreme Court. And I hate to break it to you, liberals, because I know you guys oftentimes like championing when so-called moderate conservatives show up and do something correctly here. The Supreme Court that was getting their roses so shortly ago for preventing Trump's tariffs from taking hold have now also ruled that you cannot sue the post office for intentionally not delivering your mail. You fill in the blanks there. And MAGA, as I'm noticing, is very short-sighted. So this will not impact them at all the way they realize. But old people vote by mail. You know how a lot of old people vote? For Republicans. If you don't believe me, check out the Texas primaries right now. If you want to push this through, that's fine, but please understand where this is ultimately headed. And this sucks because I'm going to have to say something now that pushes against every fiber of my being and isn't something that I believe, but I also don't trust the levers. You can already tell John Fetterman's licking his chops to just do the dumb thing because he's already punted on the idea of trying to appeal to the left because unfortunately for him, they are anti-genocide, so he doesn't really have a chance of winning a Democratic establishment or a Democratic ticket in 2028. It's only going to take a handful more of blue MAGAs to pretend like, oh, we have to show civility in order to get some of this garbage across, because liberals, just as much as conservatives, don't want to see ranked choice voting nationwide because they will also struggle to win elections as well, as I highlighted during the 9 o'clock hour. So I say all of that to say, and I hate that I'm going to say this, start working on getting your passport. Start working on getting your birth certificate now. And what sucks is, because this is going to be more of a young person thing, people in their 20s who, spoiler warning, also vote for a particular political party. Weird how these keep attacking certain demographics that all vote for a particular party in the name of catching 31 of damn Mexicans since 1982. Don't call them racist. The young people probably aren't going to go through and do these processes because, again, if you haven't done it in a while, you don't understand what a pain in the ass it is. I do. I do. I really, really do. And you're going to need to go through it. You might have to consider not voting by mail this one last time while we put this BS MAGA movement to bed that is doing nothing other than siphoning taxes to a handful of billionaires and enriching the Trump family by $4 billion. But at least Americans are getting murdered in the streets. I guess there are some positives. I shouldn't ignore the positives of the Trump administration. Why do you hate Trump so much? Yeah, sorry, I'm just reporting on the stuff that's happening. Um, you're gonna have to jump through the hoops, and it's so stupid. It's so stupid. I want to have faith that we have an opposition party that's going to stop this BS that is unprovable from happening, but we don't have that opposition party. That opposition party strangles any true opposition in the crib before it's able to get off, and then they run around panic saying, "We got to stop fascism. Vote for Cory Booker." And it's very frustrating because if you know me, you know that this bill should just get dumped on. It needs 60 votes in the Senate unless the Republicans kill the filibuster, which, I mean, don't tempt me with a good time. There's part of me that hopes they do it, but I have a feeling they won't, because they know if they do, then eventually liberals will have to pass Medicare for all, because eventually they will get a majority again, and we'll be out of villains to be able to point to as to the reason why people wouldn't be able to have it still, despite the empirical evidence that it works. Not to mention, as Mary points out, voter ID costs $5. And again, if it were a bill, if Republicans are so concerned about it, pass a bill that's your real ID. You know, the ID you insisted that I go and get. You remember? Pass a bill that says that the real ID would work as a capacity to vote. And I promise you, you'll get the votes to make it happen. But that's not what the establishment wants. It's what the voters want. 80% of the voters want it. But the establishment Republicans don't want it. They want to lock themselves in and try and block as many of the different subgroups that they know don't vote for them, because the Republican Party actively hates young people and women. Sorry. Why are you so hateful? Just reporting on the way they rule. Or reign. Can't, unfortunately, I'm beholden to reality, right? Um, a passport costs $170. Mine actually cost over $200 because I decided to expedite it to make sure that I'd be able to. Because what's funny is my friend from in Germany who went to Thailand with me, he listens to these episodes like later, and he's eventually going to hear me say this, and I know I'm going to get a text of just like, "Come on, man." But I told him I started the process to get my passport, but I hadn't because I hate paperwork. And like I waited long enough that I was like, son of a gun. If I don't get this done in enough time to actually get there, I am never going to hear the end of this. So I paid to expedite it as well. That cost me over $230. I don't remember how much the birth certificate cost me. That wasn't as bad. But again, either one of these fees is absolutely a poll tax. So we're either going to use tax dollars. We have to raise your taxes, Republicans, to pay for everybody to have free access to get this stuff. Or counterpoint, maybe just shut the hell up about it because you don't have any evidence that voter fraud is happening to begin with. Waka waka MAGA. I suggest maybe you pick that one. But it's a shame. It's a shame that that I have to tell you guys that you might have to take the precautions necessary, because I don't trust liberals to stop this from happening. And we know Republicans are going to try and spin this in the media in a way that Democrats are anti-voter ID. We watched it happen on Tuesday during the State of the Union address. And for the record, there were times when they absolutely were. They'd be like, black people can't get a driver's license. That was a ridiculous claim. I've said so since you guys have known me. But the idea that you need a passport or a birth certificate to vote, and that has to match your legal name, get the hell out of here with that. Get the hell out of here with that. I'm not going to be tricked into championing something that is obviously an effort to suppress women and young people and minorities from voting, because Republicans know how unpopular a mass Gestapo murdering people in the streets are. They know how unpopular cutting taxes for billionaires a fourth time is. They know how unpopular it is to defend a guy who's mentioned 38,000 times in the Epstein list while also pretending to care about grooming children and exposing a deep state. They know how unpopular it is. 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 So instead of trying to become more popular, they'd rather just make it more difficult for you to vote. Not on my watch. I'm going to make sure that everybody within the sound of my voice knows that the SAVE Act is a giant pile of crap. The Save America Act is a giant pile of crap. And any Democrat that decides to vote for it should be expected to be primaried hard and should be expected to be dragged, verbally, of course, on outside the box every single day until they are forced into retirement. Can't do anything about the MAGA representatives. MAGA is going to have to handle that on their own. But let's be real. There's a contingency of them that don't want women and Mexicans and black people voting. So what are you going to do? Don't call me racist. Stop acting racist. All right. With that, We're going to put a pin in it. I want to talk a little bit about foreign policy and, well, actually, I have two segments, so I can do both. We'll do foreign policy, then I want to touch a little bit on the hearings that are going to be taking place the next 2 days, and why, as much as I think they're garbage, or at least one of them is, one of them absolutely needs to happen. I hope that this opens the door for people that are mentioned, oh, I don't know, more than 30,000 times in the files to also be brought in front of people as well. More on that. We're going to do foreign policy first, though. Stay right where you are. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices. You know, I don't remember which state it is, but right now there's people, I want to say it's Texas. Don't quote me on that, and I'm kind of shooting from the hip here on it. There's people who are having a pause put on their voting status while they work through whether or not they are citizens or not. I've been seeing people pop up on socials about that. I was kind of working out a segment about it for Friday. But Ethan's asking, I'm a little confused about the SAVE Act, specifically when you say it isn't settling on real ID as an option. The bill says that an ID that adheres to the 2005 Real ID law is one of the acceptable forms of ID. Does Wisconsin Real ID not count? I'm reading. You can pick your source here. When you're searching it here, I would suggest not using a government source, as I often stated during the Biden administration. I absolutely am stating it during the Trump administration, and going into secondary sources here. But regardless of what you click on, I'm just going to pick one at random. This bill puts up new barriers by requiring Americans to provide proof of citizenship, such as a passport or original birth certificate, to register to vote, making many commonly used IDs insufficient on their own, including real IDs, driver's licenses, military IDs, and most tribal IDs. Creating new barriers for people who have changed their name, including many married women. Imposing new national photo ID requirements, including for people who vote by mail, restricting widely used mail voting practices and making it harder to vote by mail, banning innovative solutions like ranked choice voting that give voters more voice, and increasing the risk that eligible voters are wrongly removed from voter rolls. That is one source. I'd be happy to go and read 7 more if you'd like me to. This is what's happening behind the scenes. This is the way the Republicans are positioning it, is that they want you to believe that this is a vote against strictly using real ID. And I know Ethan is not one of the MAGAs, but plenty of MAGAs are just like, they wouldn't lie to us. They're absolutely lying to you, and that's borne out 1,000 times over. I'm just going to say it till I'm blue in the face, but as I stated yesterday, and I will say again today, there are days when doing Outside the Box just feels like you're screaming into an Altoid container and then throwing it off the cliff, because a lot of people just don't want to hear what you're saying, or watch this transgender, and then they don't know what else to say about it other than that they want to make sure that elections are solidified. The reason I did that is inevitably I will get a text or an email, something condemning the transgender community, because I did that, and everything else I said surrounding it is completely irrelevant, because that's how this country operates, and that's why it's so difficult for us to move forward. Anyway, there was one time where a majority of Democrats stood up to clap for Donald Trump during the State of the Union that caught my eye, but not in a way that I had time to get into it yesterday with, since I lose an hour with well, not lose, but I do an hour of the show a little bit differently than the remaining, 11 and a half hours of the week and 12 and a half hours the other week when they don't take part in the show. But as you guys know, the military industrial complex is very bipartisan. And I've already stated that I believe had Kamala Harris won, we would still be engaging in wartime activities with Iran, as well as messing with Cuba and trying to dethrone Maduro in Venezuela. I think all of those things would still be happening. Democrats find themselves in the position to be able to pretend like they are appalled by it right now. But I know damn well that they would absolutely be doing it. They might be doing it in a different way, but the outcomes would be the same. The imperialism would still take place, and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin would be happier for what was taking place, regardless of if it were Democrats or Republicans in office. Now, during the State of the Union, or should I say just before the State of the Union, Elizabeth Warren tweeted out no war with Iran, and then talked about the lies that got us involved in the Middle East in 2000, lies that little Marco and the rest of the funky bunch are currently parroting in 2026, and unfortunately a percentage of MAGA and blue MAGA for that matter are falling for. And then immediately showed up at the State of the Union in order to stand up and clap about the necessary military might to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, because if they did, then we might have to actually use diplomacy instead of just bombing the crap out of the Middle East anytime we want to take their stuff. So, God, we definitely can't let that happen. So, Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, who are willing to pretend for their base and then ultimately end up clapping and signing on to what's going on, stand out to me. What stands out to me even more, and honest to God, I'm almost kind of hoping that these guys run as a ticket in 2028, because they might actually do some damage, but it's going to be a matter of what's the word I'm looking for here? Ego. Because who would be president and who would be vice president? I feel like you'd have to like Rochambeau for it or something. But both Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna put together a piece of legislation that Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, as well as everyone in the Republican Party are doubling over themselves to try and prevent from actually becoming mainstream or actually going to a vote, because what it would call for is for every single member of Congress, House and Senate, to upvote, downvote whether or not war with Iran is acceptable. And the leaders of the Democratic Party, as well as the entire Republican Party, are trying to bend over backwards to make sure that this bill does not receive a vote. All while both parties, the MAGA movement during the Biden years, pretending to be anti-war, and the liberals, who most of my young life pretending to be anti-war. Meanwhile, all of them were actively pro-military industrial complex, are now running around in circles trying to figure out how to stop this legislation from making it into the public, because all of these people have been cosplaying as anti-war. I knew it. We all knew it. And now they'd have to go on the record. And they know that their largest donors are part of the 6 contractors that get to rake in over $450 billion of our tax dollars every year, but none of them are Somali, so don't worry about it. Seems like that fraud tends to get ignored on a pretty consistent basis. If only they were brown. And they're going to win. They're going to make sure that this bill doesn't see the light of day. And I'm noticing that mainstream sources really don't even want to talk about it in any kind of consistent basis, because they'd hate to shine a light on the fact that basically everybody in our pedophile cabal government is very, very pro blowing up brown people in the name of getting that $453 billion of our American tax dollars a year up to a nice round $500 billion, right? I don't know if they can live on the amount that we're giving them right now. What's this here? Cynthia says from the Israeli paper Hayam, the administration wants Israel to strike Iran first so that when Iran retaliates, the United States will have some cover to protect them. Again, the Republican Party will, because not all of MAGA. I realize there's like 6 of you that actually are consistent in your anti-war beliefs. But like I said, once war in Iran started, because right now only 40% of Republicans think it is justified for it to happen. Once it kicks off, a larger percentage will find their way to condoning what the orange guy's doing. And I'm sure part of that will have to do with Israel, because again, had Trump won in 2020, October 7th still would have happened. Israel still would have committed a genocide. And instead of MAGA voters saying, why are Democrats sending weapons to Israel and sending our money to Israel, they would be saying, Hamas is a terrorist group. Why won't you condemn Hamas? And do the liberal talking points of 2023 and 2024. I see the game for what it is. I say it all the time. Very easy to be anti-war when the other party's in office. A lot more difficult to do it when your guys are doing it. I know where it's headed, and I wouldn't be surprised for a second, Cynthia. I honestly expected it to break out before the State of the Union, to be frank. I'll tell you, I think the way the Clintons handled themselves during these hearings these next 2 days are probably going to weigh in heavily on when the war in Iran starts. And I'll expand on what I mean by that on the other side of the break, though, because we do have to squeeze one more in before we call it a show here. So everybody stick around, because this is going to be a pretty interesting last 7 minutes here. We'll be back. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. Still wearing the hat. All right, we got a couple minutes here to wrap the show up. Hal asked an interesting question, though, via text during the break. He said, do you believe Trump will use what happened in Cuba yesterday as an excuse to overthrow the Cuban regime by military force? I believe, and see, this is the double-edged sword of things. This is why I'm skeptical to rule out AI without looking at all angles of it, because I hate social media. I was talking crap on social media. My podcast, Off Topic with Ben and Balky, it's going to go live in an hour and 7 minutes from the recording of this here. We watched a movie about AI basically becoming the extinction event of humanity. Not a particularly original plot, but a very original way in showcasing it. And I was sitting there the entire time like, this is exactly what I'm worried about, right? And like, clearly a lot of people in Hollywood are as well. But much like with what took place on October 7th and the lead up to it, as well as the fallout afterward, if one thing is true, it is that mainstream sources have lost the narrative. I believe had what took place, and I'll go into Cuba in a second here for people who don't know what I'm talking about. Had what had taken place in Cuba happened in 2003, I think we'd immediately be overthrowing the regime. But thankfully, there's enough people who actually have info, who have the video evidence to back up the claims. And if you guys didn't see it, a ship identified with Florida showed up, initiated fire, and then the Cuban government responded in kind and ended up killing a couple of Americans on the boat who initiated the attack. And I think in a different world where we didn't have access to that information, that would immediately be used as a reason to go and start a geopolitical conflict that MAGA allegedly voted for Trump to avoid doing. And I don't think he has the guts to try and lie his way out of it, because I do believe, and you're seeing it with the Epstein list, there are certain elements of what ticked people off during the Biden years that the MAGA movement is not willing to accept out of Donald Trump. It's not a lot of things. It's not nearly as much stuff as I would have hoped we saw out of them. But occasionally those things do pop up, and I do believe that this would be one of them if it led to that. That's at least my opinion on the matter. And I will say, for all I know, the hearings have already started. I don't know when they're actually kicking off. Lord knows, I am not a Hillary Clinton supporter. I'm not a Clinton supporter in general. I think that Bill Clinton is in all likelihood equally as guilty, in my humble opinion, as anybody thinks Trump is. I think we should watch them both go down in a blaze of glory. I will say, though, as much as I have a disdain for Hillary, if you will, I am kind of intrigued at what a Hillary Clinton that has nothing to do that's speaking in front of a Senate hearing might actually say or do. I think she knows where a ton of skeletons are buried, and she has no reason to hide any of this stuff anymore. And that intrigues me very much. Hillary, in regards to the Epstein list, is filed into the Obama territory. Her name pops up quite a bit in the files, never as somebody engaging in any action. Actually, it's almost like it was designed to completely absolve her of any guilt. Like, most of the mentions are Epstein himself saying, like, yeah, if Hillary Clinton wins this, I'm not going to have any influence with her because we really don't know each other that well, implying that there's another candidate that he does know very well, you know? But who wants to jump to that conclusion of who that could be? But so the Republican Party has made it clear that they're willing to bring somebody up for a hearing who essentially has nothing to do with the Epstein list in order to placate the lock her up crowd. But what this does is open the door for, if Hillary Clinton, who is barely mentioned in the files, and when she is mentioned in the files, is only mentioned in the way that Obama is. And if you missed me talk about it, Obama's mentioned like 1,200 times in the files, and it is exclusively a bunch of white people talking crap on him. That is exclusively, for as much as Democrats suck, the current regimes, your Obama, your Biden, your Clinton, they're really not involved in this giant pedophile ring the way a certain particular president seems to be implicated pretty heavily. 38,000 times, one might say. Much more than Bill Clinton was mentioned. And again, I don't believe for a second that Bill Clinton is innocent, and I'm very excited to see what comes from his particular hearing. I don't know if they're going to be public or not. I know they threatened it with that, and then of all people, Donald Trump shut it down. But if we're doing Hillary Clinton, yeah, we're doing Donald Trump. And that's what interests me. Because if we're serious about taking down a pedophile ring, then we're serious about taking down a pedophile ring. As the Wisconsin Supreme Court races come closer, there's going to be commercials about who goes easier on pedophiles. Right now, the answer is the Republican Party because they're doing everything they can to hide these files. Yes, the Democratic Party didn't bring them up, but much like October 7th, welcome to the game of hot potato that is American politics. Time for Republicans to come through with the things they claim they were willing to fight against here and what they won elections on. Are they gonna? Absolutely the bleep not. And with that, we're going to call it a show today, guys. Download the WHBY app and catch up on any of the show you might not have been able to hear today. Or, as per usual, at 1 p.m. our time, this show will be going live on Political Voices Network. That audience is starting to grow steadily and surely, and I absolutely love the new people that are taking part in the show as well via email and in the comments of those videos. So go ahead and check it out, and we'll be up with one more show tomorrow. Haley's coming on next here. Everybody enjoy the day, and we'll talk then. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, and Political Voices Network.